My name is Helen Martin, and I am a part of a small group called the Student Success Staff. There's 6 of us, and we work on retention and students who need special aids for their college career, and I'm an adjunct teacher in the Bible department.
My name is Joe Martin, and I'm a professor of Christian ministries and chair of the Biblical Studies department. We've been here now for a little over 24 years. We came in 1989, and so this is actually our 24th year of being on the faculty at Belhaven.
I didn't choose Belhaven. My daddy chose it for me. And he came and visited here when he was itinerating on furlough, and he saw the caliber of teachers that they had here. He knew the president, McFerrin Crow, at that time, and he felt like I was his only daughter. He felt like it would be a safe place for me, and it would be small enough where I could develop leadership skills rather than going to a larger Christian college. And that was the reason I came to Belhaven, was my daddy's choice for me. When I was here, I was on the I was the freshman representative on the student council. I was president of Helen White, which was the freshman dorm. I served as the Westminster Fellowship president for 2 years. We were campus bound. Nobody had cars, so all of our activities were on campus.
I went to Duke as on an engineering scholarship, and then I felt a call to the ministry, so I changed I actually felt a call to be a medical missionary, so I became a pre-medical student, and then when I felt called to go to seminary, I changed my major again to be history, and then so I was there 4 years and prepared to go to seminary. It was a challenging time for a new Christian. I accepted Christ when I was at the end of my freshman year, before the sophomore year, and there was a lot of opposition to evangelical Christianity on the campus, and Bible professors who said they didn't believe the Bible. So it was a challenging time for me, but it was a wonderful time too, because all of those things were incentives for growth. The night that I accepted Christ, the first thought that I had was, I've been raised around the church all my life, and I didn't understand the gospel and didn't have a personal relationship with Christ until now. What about those people who've never heard? And so from then on, I began to plan to go to some place where the people had not heard of Christ, so I could tell them. We worked with Young Life for 2 years while we were seminary students. And then we had a pastorate. I had a pastorate in southern Alabama at Eufaula for a couple of years before we went overseas to Brazil. And then we were 24 years together in Brazil. There was some opposition because we were Protestants and were in an area that was where there were very few Protestants. But people who had gone there before us, missionaries who had gone there before us, had broad friendships. And so we inherited the goodwill of their friendships. And actually, people accepted us very well in the time I was there. There was more opposition when Helen was growing up.
When I was growing up, the opposition was very strong, and sometimes when my dad would go on trips, itinerating in the country, he even took some of the local police with him to protect him as he was preaching. And I went one time, I was in the choir, I went one time for special services in a town not too far from where we lived. And as the choir sang and his daddy preached, there were gunshots over our heads just to alert us that we were being watched. I came to the States for high school and college, so my junior and senior years were spent here in the States with my parents on furlough, then in a boarding school, and then I came to Belhaven. So 16, 17 years in Brazil before I came to the States.
My decision to go to Brazil was independent of Helen, and I'm glad it was that way, so that I wasn't just doing something that came automatically tagging along with her, but I felt a strong call to go to Brazil. And the fact that she was from there, she had actually felt a call to be a missionary, and so she thought she would go somewhere else besides Brazil because that was home for her. But when the Lord brought us together, and my call was for Brazil. That worked out very well, and we ended up living in the town where she had been born, actually, for several years, which is unusual for missionaries. My typical day in Brazil in the first few years was to be in the car most of the time, because I was trying to start churches in 28 towns, and there was not a dirt. I mean, it was all dirt roads. There was no pavement within 8 or 10 hours of us. And so I drove on dirt roads all the time, going from town to town. So I would visit during the daytime and preach at night. That was the first 3 years of our time in Brazil. Later on, we taught in a school where I was home at least 4 or 5 days out of the week.
My regular day in our first term was just caring for children. We laughingly tell our churches we had a fruitful first term because we had 3 children in 4 years. And so my responsibility was mainly care of the children in the household. We did a lot of hosting of evangelists and sick folks that came to see doctors, so we constantly had people in the home. But oftentimes Joe wouldn't get home for services, so I'd go trekking down to the church to lead a Bible study or to teach a Sunday school class. So it was just ordinary, everyday kinds of things.
My greatest struggle was being away from the family so much. I would get very lonely in those long drives, and then when I'd come home, I'd have to get to know the kids again. That was the most challenging thing for me.
I think for me the most challenging thing was when our children came to the age of 11, they had to go off to boarding school. And it was 12 hours away by bus. We couldn't see them in an everyday growing up situation. We often tried to get to their special functions, but it would be 12 hours up, 12 hours back, with responsibilities back at home. So I think having to send the children away at such an early age was very difficult. I think for me, in our last 18 years, we taught at the Bible Institute, where we trained laymen to take the place of pastors in the smaller interior churches. And I remember being at a Presbyterian meeting one time, and 13, I think, of the 20 pastors or 18 pastors had all been our students. And to see them active, well spoken of, leading their churches, that was a real source of pride, holy pride.
And I can join in that by saying that when we went back to visit recently, we got to have supper in the home of a professor now at that school, who is the dean of the school, and he went and brought from the other room the notes that he took in Helen's class and said that they helped him in teaching his classes. When we first went to Brazil, it was largely a rural nation. Now it's almost all urbanized. And so the little country town where we live now has skyscrapers, and it's a different kind of world, and everybody's connected with cell phones and things. Those are some dramatic changes. The churches that in that area where I was preaching in 28 different towns, 20 years later, I went back to give some lectures at a missionary training school, and when I asked people where they were from, places that I had preached the gospel 20 years before, there were full-time pastors there now. And so instead of somebody just going once a month, now there's somebody resident in the town serving Christ on an ongoing basis. And it was a real sense of satisfaction to see that.
I see good changes and I see bad changes. I think that the young people in Brazil are so involved with some of the materialism that crops up with advanced civilizations, if you want to call it that, that they may not be as faithful to the church as they could be, and that's not a good thing.
And also when we first went to Brazil, family was really solid in Brazil in a way that it wasn't in the United States. Now it's more like the situation here. So there's been a real erosion of family values in Brazil.